I'm Emma, 27, and last Thursday my sister Ashley laughed in my face when I asked to borrow $100 for groceries. She called me pathetic, said I needed to get my life together, and suggested I stop being such a financial burden on everyone. What she didn't know was that I'd been secretly managing our family's $3.5 million trust fund for 3 years. Friday morning, I walked into the bank and withdrew every penny. When the freeze hit her accounts, she fell to her knees begging. Some lessons cost more than others. Before we dive into this explosive family finance drama, what do you think could make someone so confident about denying a small loan, only to end up literally on their knees begging? Drop your predictions in the comments below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more shocking family revenge stories where the underdog gets the ultimate payback. Trust me, this financial plot twist will leave you speechless. Growing up as the younger daughter in the Patterson family meant living in the shadow of my sister Ashley's seemingly endless success story. 5 years my senior, Ashley had been groomed from childhood to be the family's crown jewel, the daughter who would carry forward our family's legacy of achievement and social standing. Our parents, Margaret and Robert Patterson, had built a successful chain of boutique hotels across the Pacific Northwest. Their business acumen and social connections had created not just wealth, but the kind of established family prestige that opened doors and commanded respect in our community. Ashley was positioned as the natural heir to this empire, while I was treated as the spare daughter who might someday support her sister's endeavors. The favoritism wasn't subtle. Ashley attended private schools, took expensive music and dance lessons, participated in elite summer programs, and was groomed for leadership from an early age. Her college education at Stanford was fully funded, including study abroad programs, internships at prestigious companies, and networking opportunities that cost tens of thousands of dollars. I attended public schools, worked part-time jobs throughout high school, and received a partial scholarship to a state university. When I graduated with honors in finance and economics, my parents acknowledged my achievement with polite congratulations before immediately shifting conversation back to Ashley's latest accomplishments in marketing and business development. Ashley's post-graduation life continued the pattern of family investment and support. Our parents helped her secure a position at a top marketing firm, subsidized her expensive downtown apartment, and provided her with a luxury car and designer wardrobe appropriate for her professional image. She was being positioned to eventually take over the family business, with every resource devoted to ensuring her success. Meanwhile, I found work as a junior financial analyst at a mid-sized investment firm, rented a modest apartment, and drove a used car I'd purchased with my own savings. My career was progressing well, and I was developing expertise in trust fund management and estate planning, but my achievements were overshadowed by Ashley's more glamorous marketing career. The family dynamic became most obvious during holidays and family gatherings. Ashley's work stories dominated dinner conversation, her boyfriend was welcomed like visiting royalty, and her opinions about business and family matters were solicited and respected. I sat at the same table, largely invisible unless someone needed my practical input about logistics or planning. But the most painful aspect of our family dynamic wasn't the obvious favoritism, it was Ashley's attitude toward me personally. She'd internalized our parents' messaging about her superior worth and treated me with condescending kindness, as if I were a well-meaning but ultimately inadequate family member who needed guidance and protection. Ashley would offer unsolicited advice about my career choices, suggest improvements to my appearance and lifestyle, and make subtle comments about my need to apply myself more if I wanted to achieve real success. She seemed to genuinely believe that her advantages were the result of superior talent and effort, rather than systematic family investment in her success. The financial disparity was staggering. While Ashley lived in a luxury apartment, dined at expensive restaurants, and traveled internationally for both work and pleasure, I carefully budgeted every expense and lived paycheck to paycheck despite earning a decent salary. The difference wasn't just our individual incomes, it was the ongoing family subsidies that supplemented Ashley's lifestyle while I received no comparable support. 3 years ago, everything changed when our grandfather passed away and left behind a complex estate that included a $3.5 million trust fund intended to support both Ashley and me throughout our lives. The trust was designed to provide steady income while preserving principal for future generations, but it required sophisticated financial management to maximize returns and minimize tax implications. Our parents, recognizing my expertise in financial planning and trust administration, asked me to serve as the fund's manager. They believed Ashley was too busy with her marketing career to handle the detailed financial work, while my background made me the natural choice for managing investments and distributions. I accepted the responsibility eagerly, seeing it as an opportunity to finally contribute meaningfully to family financial planning. I spent months studying the trust documents, consulting with attorneys and tax specialists, and developing investment strategies that would optimize the fund's performance while meeting both beneficiaries' needs. The trust was structured to provide monthly distributions to both Ashley and me, with additional funds available for major expenses like home purchases, business investments, or education costs. As the fund manager, I had discretionary authority over investment decisions and distribution timing, though major changes required approval from the trust's legal administrators. Managing the trust became my passion project. I researched investment opportunities, monitored market conditions, and implemented strategies that significantly outperformed the conservative approach our grandfather's advisors had recommended. Within 18 months, I'd increased the fund's value by over $400,000 through careful portfolio management and strategic rebalancing. But Ashley was completely disconnected from the trust's management and performance. She received her monthly distributions automatically and treated them as supplemental income rather than returns on a carefully managed investment portfolio. She had no idea how much work went into generating her payments or how successfully I was growing the fund's overall value. More problematically, Ashley began treating her trust distributions as guaranteed income she deserved rather than benefits from a family inheritance. She increased her spending accordingly, upgraded her lifestyle expectations, and began making financial commitments based on anticipated future distributions. Our parents were thrilled with my management of the trust but continued treating Ashley as the family's primary success story. My financial expertise was valued as a useful family service, while Ashley's marketing career was celebrated as evidence of superior achievement and potential. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was generating significant wealth for both Ashley and myself through sophisticated financial management, while she received credit for earning money through her day job. I was creating our shared financial security, but she was considered the successful daughter with the bright future. This dynamic had been simmering for 3 years when the incident occurred that would change everything between us. Ashley's attitude toward money, her assumptions about her own financial independence, and her complete disregard for my contributions to her lifestyle were about to collide with reality in the most devastating way possible. The sister who treated me like a financial burden was about to discover exactly how much her comfortable life depended on my expertise and goodwill. The conversation that changed everything happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon when I called Ashley to ask for help with an unexpected financial emergency. My car had broken down, requiring a $400 repair that would completely drain my checking account and leave me unable to buy groceries for the week. I'd calculated that borrowing $100 would cover basic food expenses until my next paycheck arrived. I should have known better than to ask Ashley for money, but I was desperate and still held on to hope that family loyalty might overcome her usual self-centeredness. I called her during lunch, explaining the situation quickly and asking if she could lend me $100 until Friday when I could pay her back immediately. The silence that followed my request was deafening. Then Ashley began laughing. Not the sympathetic chuckle of someone who understood temporary financial stress, but the cruel laughter of someone who found genuine amusement in my predicament. "Emma, are you seriously asking me for money right now?" she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You're 27 years old. How do you not have $100 in your bank account?" I tried to explain that the car repair had been unexpected and that I'd had to choose between fixing my transportation or buying groceries, but Ashley wasn't interested in details. She'd seized on my request as evidence of fundamental character flaws that she was eager to enumerate. "This is exactly what I'm talking about when I say you need to get your life together," she continued. Successful people don't call their sisters begging for grocery money. They have emergency funds, they budget properly, and they don't put themselves in positions where a minor car repair becomes a financial crisis. Her lecture continued for several minutes, covering my poor financial planning, my lack of career ambition, and my tendency to rely on others instead of solving my own problems. She spoke about money management as if it were a simple matter of self-discipline and good decision-making, completely oblivious to the irony of receiving unsolicited financial advice from someone whose comfortable lifestyle was funded by trust distributions I managed. "Ashley," I interrupted, "I'm not asking for charity. I just need a small loan that I can repay in 2 days. This is temporary financial tightness, not chronic irresponsibility." "Emma, you're missing the point," she replied, her voice taking on the patient tone she used when explaining obvious concepts to slower people. "The fact that you're in this situation at all shows that you're not managing your finances properly. And honestly, lending you money would just enable your poor decision-making." She began offering unsolicited advice about budgeting, emergency savings, and career development. She suggested I might need to consider whether my current job was really the right fit if it left me unable to handle minor financial emergencies. She recommended financial planning apps, budgeting courses, and self-help books about money management. The most galling part was her assumption that she was qualified to give financial advice based on her apparent success at avoiding money problems. She spoke about financial responsibility and independence as if they were personal achievements rather than the natural result of family subsidies and trust fund distributions. "Look, Emma," she said finally, "I care about you, which is why I'm not going to enable this pattern. You need to learn to handle your own financial problems instead of calling family members every time something unexpected happens." "This is the first time I've ever asked you for money," I pointed out, my voice getting sharper despite my efforts to stay calm. "Maybe the first time you've asked directly," Ashley replied, "but you've always been the family member who needs help and support. Mom and Dad worry about you constantly because you can't seem to get your life stable. They're always talking about whether you're okay financially, whether your job is working out, whether you need assistance with this or that." This was news to me. Our parents had never expressed concerns about my financial stability, and I'd never asked them for money or support since graduating college. But Ashley seemed convinced that I was an ongoing source of family worry due to my inability to achieve independence. "Ashley, I don't know what conversations you think our parents are having, but I've been financially independent for 5 years. I pay my own rent, buy my own groceries, and handle my own expenses. I'm asking for a temporary $100 loan because of an unexpected car repair, not because I'm chronically unable to support myself." "Emma, you're getting defensive, which usually means someone's hit close to the truth," she said, her voice taking on a therapeutic tone that made me want to hang up immediately. "Maybe this is an opportunity for some honest self-reflection about your financial habits and life choices." The conversation ended when Ashley suggested I might want to move back in with our parents temporarily to get back on my feet and develop better money management skills. She offered to talk to them about creating a family financial plan that might help me become more independent over time. "I don't need to move back home," I said firmly. "I just need to borrow $100 for groceries. And I think you need to solve this problem yourself instead of looking for easy solutions from family members," Ashley replied. "Sometimes tough love is what people need to grow and develop better life skills." She hung up, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. The sister who lived in a luxury apartment subsidized by trust fund distributions had just lectured me about financial responsibility and independence. The woman whose comfortable lifestyle depended entirely on investments I managed had refused to lend me grocery money because it might enable my poor decision-making. I spent that evening eating ramen noodles and thinking about the conversation with growing anger. Ashley's refusal to help wasn't just about the money, it was about her fundamental belief that she was successful through merit while I was struggling through incompetence. She genuinely saw herself as the responsible family member who'd achieved independence through good choices, while viewing me as the problematic sister who needed tough love and financial education. What made her attitude particularly infuriating was my knowledge of how completely wrong her assumptions were. While she was lecturing me about budgeting and emergency funds, I was managing investments that generated thousands of dollars monthly for both of us. While she was suggesting I needed financial education, I was implementing sophisticated portfolio strategies that had grown our shared trust fund by hundreds of thousands of dollars. The sister who thought she was teaching me about money management had no idea that her teacher was the person she'd just humiliated for needing grocery money. That night, I made a decision that would change our family dynamic forever. I was done enabling Ashley's delusions about her own financial superiority, and I was done being treated like the family's financial burden while secretly managing our shared wealth. Ashley was about to learn exactly how much her comfortable life depended on the sister she'd just treated with such contempt. Friday morning, I woke up with a clarity of purpose I'd never experienced before. Ashley's humiliating lecture about financial responsibility had crystallized something that had been building for years. I was tired of being treated as the family disappointment while secretly managing the very wealth that funded their comfortable lifestyle. I called in sick to work and drove to Sterling Trust and Investment, the financial institution that held our family trust fund. As the designated trustee, I had complete authority over fund management and distribution decisions, though I'd never exercised that power in any way that might disrupt Ashley's comfortable expectations. The trust documents were clear about my authority. As the sole trustee, I could modify investment strategies, adjust distribution schedules, and make discretionary decisions about fund access without requiring approval from beneficiaries. The only limitations were legal requirements to act in good faith and maintain proper documentation of all decisions. I'd been managing the trust conservatively for 3 years, focusing on steady growth and reliable distributions that supported both Ashley and me without creating complications or conflict. But the trust documents allowed for much more aggressive management strategies if I determined they were in the long-term interests of the beneficiaries. I met with James Morrison, the senior account manager who'd worked with me since I became trustee. James knew the trust's performance history and had often praised my management decisions, but he was surprised when I requested an immediate liquidation of the entire portfolio. "Emma, that's a significant decision," he said carefully. "Are you sure you want to convert everything to cash right now? The market has been performing well, and your current asset allocation is generating excellent returns." "I need to make some strategic changes to the trust structure," I explained. "I'm considering new investment opportunities that require immediate liquidity." This wasn't entirely untrue. I was considering new investment opportunities, specifically, opportunities that wouldn't involve funding Ashley's lifestyle while she treated me with contempt and condescension. The liquidation process took most of the morning. James walked me through the paperwork, confirmed my authority to make such decisions, and arranged for the funds to be transferred to a money market account under my sole control. By noon, the trust's entire $3.5 million portfolio had been converted to cash and placed in an account that only I could access. The next step was more emotionally difficult but equally necessary. I contacted the automatic payment system that distributed monthly funds to both Ashley and me, and suspended all future payments indefinitely. As trustee, I had discretionary authority over distribution timing and amounts, and I decided that immediate distributions were no longer in the best interests of the beneficiaries. I also called Ashley's bank and requested information about her account balance and recent transaction history. As a co-beneficiary of the trust with shared financial interests, I had legal standing to request this information, and what I learned was exactly what I'd suspected. Ashley's checking account contained $847, and her savings account held just over $3,000. Despite earning a good salary from her marketing job, she'd been spending every penny she made and relying entirely on trust distributions to maintain her expensive lifestyle. Her monthly expenses exceeded her salary by nearly $2,500, with the difference covered by the trust payments I'd been generating through careful investment management. Most concerning was her credit card debt, which totaled over $15,000 across 3 different cards. Ashley had been borrowing against anticipated trust distributions to fund purchases she couldn't afford with her salary, assuming that future payments would cover her mounting obligations. Her rent alone was $3,200 monthly. More than half her take-home pay from her marketing job. Add in her car payment, insurance, dining expenses, shopping habits, and social activities, and Ashley was living a lifestyle that required nearly $7,500 monthly to maintain. Without trust distributions, she could afford maybe half her current expenses. The financial picture was even worse than I'd imagined. The sister who'd lectured me about budgeting and emergency funds was living paycheck to paycheck despite receiving substantial unearned income from the trust one managed. The woman who'd suggested I needed financial education was carrying high-interest debt while spending money she didn't have on lifestyle expenses she couldn't afford. But Ashley had no idea how precarious her financial situation really was. She'd never bothered to understand the trust structure, never asked about investment performance, and never considered what might happen if distributions were delayed or suspended. She treated her monthly payments like guaranteed salary rather than returns on investments that required active management and could fluctuate based on market conditions or trustee decisions. I spent the weekend researching my legal options and consulting with the trust's attorney about trustee authority and fiduciary responsibilities. The lawyer confirmed that I had broad discretionary power over distributions and could suspend payments temporarily for strategic purposes, as long as I documented legitimate financial reasons for the decisions. I drafted a formal letter to Ashley explaining that the trust was undergoing strategic restructuring that would require suspension of distributions for an indefinite period while new investment opportunities were evaluated. The letter was professionally written and legally sound, but it would effectively cut off her financial lifeline without warning. Monday morning, I submitted the distribution suspension paperwork and sent Ashley the formal notification. Her monthly trust payment, which was scheduled to arrive that Wednesday, would not be processed. Nor would any future payments until I decided the restructuring was complete. The timing was perfect. Ashley's rent was due in 10 days, her credit card payments were due at the end of the month, and her checking account contained less than $900. Without the trust distribution she was expecting, she wouldn't be able to cover her most basic expenses. But I wasn't done. I also implemented a freeze on the trust account that would prevent any emergency withdrawals or advance distributions. If Ashley requested emergency funds, she'd need to submit a formal application explaining her financial situation and demonstrating legitimate need, a process that could take weeks to complete. By Tuesday afternoon, the financial foundation of Ashley's comfortable lifestyle had been completely eliminated. The sister who'd refused to lend me $100 for groceries was about to discover what real financial emergency looked like. I felt a mixture of anticipation and satisfaction as I waited for Ashley to realize what had happened. The woman who'd lectured me about money management was about to learn that her own financial security had always depended on the sister she'd treated with such condescension. Wednesday morning, Ashley's expected trust distribution failed to arrive. By Thursday, she'd be calling the bank to inquire about the delay. By Friday, she'd be panicking about her inability to pay rent and cover basic expenses. The sister who thought she was financially independent was about to discover that everything she'd taken for granted depended on the continued goodwill of the person she'd just humiliated for asking to borrow grocery money. Wednesday afternoon, my phone started buzzing with increasingly frantic calls from Ashley that I chose not to answer. She left voicemails that progressed from casual inquiry to genuine panic as she realized her trust distribution hadn't arrived and her bank couldn't provide any information about the delay. "Emma, hey, I'm getting a weird message from my bank about my trust payment," her first voicemail said, her voice still confident and slightly annoyed. "Can you call me back and explain what's going on? I need to pay some bills today." By Thursday morning, her tone had shifted dramatically. "Emma, I really need you to call me back immediately. My trust payment didn't come through, and the bank is saying something about account restructuring. I have no idea what that means, but I need access to my money right now." I let her calls go to voicemail while I went about my normal workday, listening to each message with growing satisfaction. Ashley was discovering what financial vulnerability actually felt like, and her panic was escalating with each passing hour. Her third voicemail revealed the full scope of her predicament. "Emma, this is becoming a serious problem. My rent is due in 6 days, and I don't have enough in my checking account to cover it. Plus I have credit card payments due next week. I need my trust money immediately, so please call me back and fix whatever administrative error is causing this delay. The word error was perfect. Ashley couldn't conceive that her financial support might be intentionally suspended. She assumed there had been some kind of banking mistake or administrative oversight that I would quickly resolve once I understood the urgency of her situation. By Thursday evening, her messages were becoming desperate. "Emma, I've been calling you all day and you're not responding. This isn't funny anymore. I need my trust distribution right now, and I need you to explain what's happening with the account. My landlord is already asking about rent, and I can't tell him I don't have the money." Friday morning brought the breakthrough I'd been waiting for. Ashley called me at work, bypassing my personal phone entirely, and when I answered she was clearly on the verge of a complete breakdown. "Emma, thank God I reached you," she said, her voice shaking. "I've been trying to call you for 2 days. There's some kind of problem with the trust account, and I can't access my money. I need you to go to the bank immediately and straighten this out." "What kind of problem?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. "The bank is saying the account is frozen or restructured or something. They won't tell me anything because I'm not the account manager. But I need my money today, Emma. I have rent due Monday, and I'm already behind on my credit card payments." I let the silence stretch for several seconds before responding. "Ashley, I received your bank notices. The trust is undergoing strategic restructuring as part of a comprehensive review of investment performance and distribution strategies." "What does that mean?" she demanded. "And why didn't you tell me this was happening?" "It means I'm evaluating whether current distribution levels are sustainable given market conditions and long-term fund preservation requirements," I replied, using the kind of financial jargon that would make her feel excluded from decisions about her own money. "Emma, I don't understand any of that financial stuff, but I need my monthly payment right now. Can't you just approve it manually or something?" The irony was exquisite. The sister who'd lectured me about financial responsibility was admitting she didn't understand basic investment concepts while begging for emergency access to money she'd never earned. "Ashley, trust restructuring is a complex process that can't be rushed for individual convenience. I need to complete comprehensive analysis before resuming distributions." "How long is that going to take?" she asked, her voice rising to near hysteria. "Several weeks, possibly months, depending on what the analysis reveals about optimal distribution strategies." The silence that followed was filled with Ashley's panicked breathing. I could practically hear her calculating how long she could survive without trust distributions. "Emma, you don't understand," she finally said, her voice breaking. "I can't wait months. I can't even wait weeks. I need money right now, today, or I'm going to lose my apartment. Maybe this is an opportunity for you to evaluate your spending habits and develop better financial independence," I said, deliberately echoing the language she'd used when refusing to lend me $100. "This isn't the time for financial advice." Ashley screamed. "This is an emergency. I need you to unfreeze my money immediately." "I'm afraid that's not possible during the restructuring process," I replied calmly. "All distributions are suspended until the analysis is complete." Ashley began crying then, sobbing into the phone as the reality of her situation finally penetrated her panic. "Emma, please, I'm begging you. I don't have any other options. I can't pay my rent, I can't make my credit card payments, I don't have money for food or gas or anything." The desperation in her voice was everything I'd hoped to hear, but I wasn't finished yet. "Have you considered asking family members for temporary assistance?" I suggested. "Maybe Mom and Dad could help until the trust situation is resolved." "I already called them," Ashley sobbed. "They're traveling in Europe for 3 weeks, and their accounts are locked for international security. They can't wire money from overseas." Perfect. Our parents were unreachable, Ashley's financial foundation had collapsed, and she was completely dependent on my willingness to restore her trust access. "What about friends or colleagues?" I continued. Surely someone could lend you money temporarily. Emma, I need thousands of dollars, not lunch money, Ashley said, her voice filled with desperation. Nobody I know has that kind of cash available for loans. How much do you need exactly? I asked, though I already knew the answer from my research into her financial situation. My rent is $3,200, I have $2,800 in credit card minimums due, and I need at least $500 for basic expenses. So about $6,500 just to get through this month. That's a substantial amount, I said thoughtfully. Much more than someone might casually borrow from family members. Emma, what are you saying? Are you going to help me or not? I paused for several seconds, letting her desperation build. Ashley, do you remember our conversation last Thursday when I asked to borrow $100? Another silence, this one filled with growing recognition of where this conversation was heading. Emma, that was completely different, she said weakly. How was it different? Because you were asking for money you should have had yourself. This is a banking emergency that's not my fault. So when you need money, it's an emergency that requires immediate family assistance. But when I needed money, it was evidence of poor financial planning that you wouldn't enable? Ashley's crying intensified as she realized exactly what was happening. Emma, please don't do this. I'm sorry about Thursday, okay? I was wrong to say those things. But this is serious, I could lose my apartment. You're right, I said calmly. This is serious. Maybe it's time for some honest self-reflection about your financial habits and life choices. The line went quiet except for Ashley's sobbing, and I knew she was finally understanding that her comfortable life had always depended on the sister she'd treated with such contempt. Ashley's complete financial meltdown accelerated over the weekend as the reality of her situation became impossible to ignore. Saturday morning, she showed up at my apartment unannounced, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled, her designer clothes were wrinkled, and her face was puffy from crying. When I opened the door, she immediately fell to her knees on my hallway floor. Emma, please, she sobbed, her voice breaking completely. I'll do anything. I'm begging you to restore my trust access. I can't lose my apartment. I can't destroy my credit. Please, I'm literally on my knees asking for your help. The sight of my arrogant sister kneeling in my doorway was more satisfying than I'd imagined it would be. The woman who'd lectured me about financial responsibility was now prostrating herself and begging for money from the sister she'd humiliated just days earlier. Ashley, get up, I said calmly. Come inside so we can talk. She scrambled to her feet and followed me into my modest living room, her eyes darting around as if seeing my simple lifestyle for the first time. She sat on the edge of my couch, wringing her hands and looking desperate. I understand now, she said, her voice shaking. I understand that you've been managing all our money this whole time. I never realized how much work went into maintaining the trust or how much control you actually have over distributions. I sat across from her, studying her face as she tried to process the power dynamic she'd never bothered to understand before. What exactly do you understand now, Ashley? I understand that I've been completely dependent on money you generate through investments I know nothing about, she said, the words clearly painful to admit. I understand that what I thought was automatic income was actually your hard work making money for both of us. And I understand that I've been treating you terribly while you've been secretly supporting my entire lifestyle, she continued, tears streaming down her face. I had no idea that my rent, my car payment, my whole life was only possible because of your financial management. This admission was progress, but I wasn't ready to let her off the hook yet. Ashley, last Thursday you refused to lend me $100 and lectured me about financial responsibility. You told me I needed to get my life together and stop being a burden on the family. Do you remember that conversation? She nodded miserably. I remember every word, and I'm so ashamed. I was lecturing you about money while living off money you were making for me. I was calling you financially irresponsible while being completely irresponsible myself. You told me that lending me money would enable my poor decision-making, I continued. You said I needed to learn to handle my own financial problems instead of relying on family members. I know, Ashley whispered. I was being a complete hypocrite. I was giving you advice about independence while being completely dependent myself. I let her sit with that admission for several moments before continuing. Ashley, I've looked at your financial records. You're carrying $15,000 in credit card debt, your expenses exceed your salary by $2,500 monthly, and you have less than $4,000 in total savings. You've been living entirely off trust distributions while criticizing me for asking to borrow grocery money. Her face flushed with shame as she realized I knew the full extent of her financial irresponsibility. Emma, I know how bad that looks. I know I've been living beyond my means and making terrible choices with money. But I thought the trust payments were guaranteed. I thought I could count on that income forever. Why did you think that? Because I never bothered to understand how it actually worked, she admitted. I just assumed the money would always be there, and I planned my whole life around receiving it. This was the heart of Ashley's problem. She'd never taken responsibility for understanding her own financial situation because she'd always assumed someone else would manage the details for her. Ashley, do you understand what my role as trustee actually involves? She shook her head. I thought you just signed some papers occasionally. I had no idea you were actively managing investments and making decisions that affected how much money we receive. I spent the next 20 minutes explaining trust fund management, investment strategies, and the amount of work involved in generating the returns that had supported her lifestyle. Ashley listened with growing amazement and horror as she realized how much expertise and effort went into maintaining her financial comfort. Emma, I had no idea, she said when I finished. I thought you just had some kind of boring desk job while I was building a real career. I never realized you were actually creating wealth for both of us. And while I was creating that wealth, you were treating me like the family's financial burden, I pointed out. I know, and I hate myself for that. I was so arrogant and ignorant. I thought I was successful because of my marketing job, but my real success was coming from your work that I didn't even know about. Ashley's recognition of her dependence was gratifying, but I needed to address the fundamental attitude problem that had created this situation. Ashley, this isn't just about money. This is about how you see our relationship and our family dynamic. You've always treated me like I was less successful, less capable, and less important than you are. You're right, she said, crying again. I've always thought of myself as the successful sister and you as the one who needed help and guidance. I thought I was doing better in life because I had nicer things and seemed more independent. But you were never independent, I said firmly. You were completely dependent on my financial management while maintaining the illusion of independence through ignorance about where your money actually came from. Ashley nodded miserably. I see that now. I was living in a fantasy where I thought I was self-sufficient and successful, when really I was just benefiting from your hard work without acknowledging it or appreciating it. I studied her face, trying to determine whether her remorse was genuine or just desperate manipulation to restore her access to money. Ashley, what do you think should happen now? I think I need to completely change how I live and how I treat you, she said immediately. I think I need to understand my real financial situation and take responsibility for my mistakes. And I think I owe you a massive apology for everything I've said and done. And the trust distributions? She was quiet for a long moment before answering. I think that's completely up to you. I think I've proven that I can't be trusted to handle money responsibly, and I think you should make whatever decisions you think are best for both of us. This was the acknowledgement of power I'd been waiting for. Ashley finally understood that her financial security depended entirely on my goodwill and expertise. Ashley's admission that trust decisions should be completely up to me was exactly what I'd hoped to hear, but I wasn't ready to restore her financial access without establishing some fundamental changes to our relationship dynamic. If she was going to benefit from my financial management, she needed to earn that privilege through genuine behavioral change and ongoing accountability. Ashley, I appreciate your apology, but words aren't enough to rebuild trust after years of condescending treatment, I told her as she sat nervously on my couch. If you want trust distributions to resume, you need to demonstrate real changes in how you handle money and how you treat me. She nodded eagerly. I'll do whatever you think is necessary. I'll change everything about how I manage finances. Just please tell me what you need from me. I'd spent the weekend developing conditions that would address both her financial irresponsibility and her attitude toward me. These weren't punishment, they were accountability measures that would ensure she understood the value of the money she received and the work that went into generating it. First, you need to completely restructure your lifestyle to live within your actual salary, I said. That means finding a cheaper apartment, eliminating unnecessary expenses, and paying off your credit card debt before resuming any luxury spending. Ashley's face went pale as she calculated what this would mean for her current lifestyle. Emma, my lease isn't up for 8 months. I can't just move immediately. Then you need to find a roommate, sublet part of the apartment, or negotiate with your landlord about early termination, I replied. Those are your problems to solve. I'm not going to subsidize an apartment that costs more than half your salary. Okay, she said quietly. I'll figure something out. What else? Second, you need to attend financial literacy classes and demonstrate competency in basic money management before receiving any trust distributions. I want to see evidence that you understand budgeting, debt management, and investment principles. This requirement would force Ashley to confront her financial ignorance and develop actual skills instead of relying on my expertise while remaining ignorant about money management. Third, any future trust distributions will be conditional on maintaining financial responsibility. If you accumulate credit card debt, exceed your budget, or make purchases you can't afford with your salary, distributions will be suspended immediately. Ashley was taking notes on her phone, clearly recognizing that these weren't negotiable suggestions but requirements for maintaining access to the trust fund. Fourth, you need to acknowledge publicly, to our parents and extended family, that your lifestyle has been dependent on trust distributions managed by me, and that your previous financial advice to me was inappropriate given your own financial irresponsibility. This requirement would eliminate the family mythology that portrayed Ashley as the financially successful daughter while I was the one who needed guidance and support. Emma, that's going to be really embarrassing, Ashley said weakly. Less embarrassing than losing your apartment because you can't pay rent, I replied firmly. And much less embarrassing than kneeling in my hallway begging for money after refusing to lend me $100. She winced but nodded. You're right. I'll talk to Mom and Dad when they get back from Europe. Fifth, you'll pay me back the $100 I asked to borrow, plus interest, as acknowledgement that your refusal was based on arrogance rather than legitimate financial concern. This was symbolic rather than practical. I didn't need the money, but I wanted her to understand that her previous behavior had consequences. And finally, I continued, you'll write me a formal letter acknowledging your financial dependence, apologizing for your condescending treatment, and committing to treating me with respect going forward. This letter will be kept on file with the trust documentation. Ashley looked overwhelmed by the scope of changes I was requiring, but she didn't argue with any of the conditions. She understood that she had no negotiating power in this situation. How long do I have to complete these requirements? She asked. You have 30 days to find cheaper housing and enroll in financial education classes. You have 60 days to complete the classes and demonstrate competency through testing. The letter and family conversation need to happen within 1 week. And what happens to trust distributions during this period? I'd been thinking about this carefully. Ashley needed enough support to avoid complete financial collapse, but not enough to maintain her current irresponsible lifestyle. I'll provide emergency assistance for basic needs, a maximum of $1,500 monthly for rent assistance, groceries, and transportation. No money for dining out, shopping, entertainment, or any non-essential expenses. This emergency support ends immediately if you meet the requirements and qualify for regular distributions. Ashley's relief was visible, but $1,500 was less than half what she'd been receiving from the trust and would require significant lifestyle changes to survive. "Emma, I'm grateful for any help, but $1,500 won't cover my current rent," she said carefully. "Then you need to solve your housing problem quickly," I replied. "I'm not going to subsidize financial choices you made when you thought trust money would always be available." We spent the next hour working through practical details. Ashley would need to find a roommate within 2 weeks or negotiate early lease termination. She'd need to cancel subscriptions, sell unnecessary possessions, and eliminate all discretionary spending. She'd need to create a strict budget and provide monthly financial reports demonstrating compliance with spending limits. Most importantly, she'd need to fundamentally change her attitude toward money and toward me. The days of treating trust distributions as guaranteed income were over, and the days of treating me as the less successful sister were finished permanently. "Ashley, I want to be clear about something," I said as our conversation was ending. "This isn't about punishing you, though I admit there's some satisfaction in watching you face consequences for your behavior. This is about creating a sustainable financial relationship where you understand the value of money and respect the work that goes into generating it." "I understand," she said, though I could see her struggling to process the magnitude of changes required. "Do you? Because 3 days ago you thought I was the irresponsible sister who needed financial advice. Now you're discovering that your entire lifestyle depends on my expertise and goodwill. That's a significant shift in perspective." Ashley nodded slowly. "It's humbling. It's terrifying. And it makes me realize how wrong I've been about everything." I stood up, indicating that our conversation was over. "You have 1 week to provide the written apology and have the conversation with our parents. After that, we'll discuss timeline for the other requirements." Ashley stood as well, looking uncertain about how to end this interaction. "Emma, thank you for giving me a chance to make this right. I know I don't deserve your help after how I've treated you." "You're right, you don't deserve it," I said matter-of-factly. "But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because managing this trust responsibly means helping both beneficiaries learn to handle money properly." She left my apartment that day with a completely different understanding of our family dynamic, her own capabilities, and her dependence on the sister she'd always taken for granted. 6 months later, I was reading Ashley's monthly financial report while drinking coffee in my new downtown apartment, a luxury I could now afford thanks to increased trust distributions I'd allocated to myself as compensation for my management work. Ashley had met every requirement I'd established, though the journey had been more difficult than either of us anticipated. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. Ashley found a roommate within 2 weeks, negotiated early lease termination for a 1-bedroom apartment that cost $1,800 monthly instead of $3,200, and sold her designer wardrobe to pay down credit card debt. She completed financial literacy courses with genuine enthusiasm, discovering concepts she'd never bothered to learn during years of financial irresponsibility. Most importantly, she'd had the conversation with our parents that completely reset their understanding of our family dynamic. When Mom and Dad returned from Europe, Ashley sat them down and explained how her lifestyle had always been funded by trust distributions I managed, how she'd been carrying substantial debt while lecturing me about financial responsibility, and how her ignorance about money management had nearly destroyed her financial security. Our parents were shocked to learn that their successful daughter had been living paycheck to paycheck despite substantial unearned income, while their struggling daughter had been expertly managing investments that generated wealth for the entire family. The revelation forced them to reconsider years of assumptions about which daughter was actually thriving. "We had no idea you were handling such complex financial management," Mom told me during a family dinner a month after their return. "We thought Ashley was the business-minded daughter while you were just doing routine office work." Dad was equally surprised by the scope of my responsibilities and expertise. "Emma, I owe you an apology for not recognizing how much skill and work goes into managing a trust fund this size. You've obviously been doing an excellent job." Ashley's written apology had been thorough and painful to read. She acknowledged years of condescending treatment, admitted her complete financial dependence on my expertise, and committed to treating me as an equal family member rather than someone who needed guidance and correction. I realize now that I've been living in a fantasy where I thought I was successful and independent, she wrote. In reality, I was completely dependent on your financial skills while being too arrogant to acknowledge or appreciate your contributions to my lifestyle. I treated you like you were less capable when you were actually the most financially capable person in our family. The new distribution structure I'd implemented was working well for both of us. Ashley received $2,500 monthly, enough to cover her reasonable expenses but not enough to fund irresponsible spending. I received $3,500 monthly plus additional compensation for trust management, reflecting both my expertise and the extra work involved in portfolio oversight. But the most satisfying change was in how Ashley treated me day to day. The condescending advice and subtle put-downs had been replaced by genuine respect and appreciation. She asked my opinion about financial decisions, thanked me regularly for managing the trust, and acknowledged my expertise in conversations with friends and colleagues. Emma has been managing our family trust fund for years and doing an incredible job, I'd overheard her telling a friend. I used to think I was the successful one, but it turns out she's been creating wealth for both of us while I was just spending money I didn't understand. The experience had taught both of us valuable lessons about money, family dynamics, and respect. Ashley learned that financial security requires both earning and managing money responsibly, while I learned that expertise without acknowledgement can breed resentment and that sometimes dramatic action is necessary to reset dysfunctional relationships. 3 months ago, Ashley had surprised me by asking if I'd be willing to teach her more about investment management and trust administration. She wanted to understand the work that went into maintaining her financial security and potentially help with some of the simpler management tasks. I don't expect you to manage my money forever, she said during one of our monthly financial check-ins. I think I should learn enough to at least understand what you're doing and maybe help with some of the work. This request represented a fundamental shift in her attitude. From entitled beneficiary to appreciative partner who wanted to contribute rather than just consume. Last week, Ashley paid me back the $100 I'd originally asked to borrow, plus $25 in interest and a card that said thank you for teaching me what financial responsibility actually means. It was a small gesture, but it represented closure on the incident that had started our entire conflict. Looking back, freezing the trust fund had been the best decision I'd ever made. It forced Ashley to confront her financial irresponsibility, acknowledge my contributions to her lifestyle, and develop genuine respect for the work involved in creating and maintaining wealth. The sister who'd mocked me for asking to borrow $100 learned that her comfortable life depended entirely on the person she'd treated with contempt. The woman who'd lectured me about financial responsibility discovered that she'd been completely financially irresponsible while benefiting from my expertise. Most importantly, I'd learned to value my own expertise and demand the respect I deserved for my contributions to our family's financial security. I was no longer the overlooked daughter who managed money in the background, I was the financial architect whose skills and decisions shaped our entire family's future. Final call to action. Sometimes the people who treat you worst are the ones who depend on you most, they just don't realize it until their support system disappears. Have you ever been taken for granted by someone whose life you were secretly supporting? How do you handle family members who lecture you about problems they're guilty of themselves? I'd love to hear your stories about toxic family dynamics and financial manipulation in the comments below. If this revenge story satisfied your need for justice, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales where the underdog gets the ultimate last laugh. Share this with anyone who's ever been the responsible family member while getting treated like the problem child. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is show people exactly how much they depend on what they've been taking for granted. Thank you for following my journey from family doormat to financial powerhouse. Remember, never let anyone make you feel small for being responsible, and never be afraid to use your power when people abuse your generosity. The family member who thinks they're teaching you lessons might be the one who needs to learn what life looks like without your support.